GoNabit is a very successful regional startup that was acquired by Living Social by the co-founders Dan Stewart and Sohrab Jambani, if I'm spelling it right. Yeah. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Alexandra Thomas. Sorry.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this behind-the-scenes story of GoNabit. I'll just, you've been introduced to everyone. We didn't really decide how we're going to structure the panel, so I will start, and then hopefully the audience will guide me later on. So the first question I'm sure that's on everybody's minds is the price that you were acquired for. Can you reveal that to us today? If anyone else on the panel wants to reveal that.
No, we can't reveal what we sold it for.
Yes,
is a simple answer.
Okay. So I'd like to just go back then to the beginning of the story, and perhaps Rabia, you can let the audience know how did this the GoNabit start? What is the relationship with Bait? Just the beginning of the entire scenario, if you will.
All right. So, I think our versions of it may be somewhat similar and somewhat different. So I'll speak about sort of my own perspective of it. To me, GoNabit started with Dan joining Bait many, many years ago. Dan came to the organization into a sales role, was one of our best performing sales professionals right off the offset, and was one of the most quickly promoted people within the Bait organization. So he showed amazing talent at absolutely everything he did. And one of the things that he excelled in very early on was learning about a wide variety of topics and internalizing it and using it to improve Bait.com. So at some point we changed the role that Dan was involved in at Bait, and he created a title for himself called Chief Opportunity Officer. And the role of that was, the responsibilities therein was basically to look for opportunities for Bait to invest in. So Bait, as some of you might know, is now an 11-year-old business. We're sort of the dinosaurs of the internet in the Middle East. We're one of the oldest companies out there that still survived and is still growing. We had a lot of cash on our books, and we were looking for opportunities to invest in. And so over the course of about 6 months or a year, Dan was looking at various opportunities, and one day he knocked on my door and said, hey, there's this group buying craze going on in the US. I think it's a wonderful thing for us to do in the Middle East. What do you think? To which point my response was, sounds brilliant. Let's proceed on that front. I would say concurrently with that, a few weeks into Dan sort of tackling that, Sohrab knocks on our door with a close friend of ours, a mutual, saying, listen, I've just left an opportunity I was in, looking to do something entrepreneurial. And during the course of the conversation, we mentioned group buying and what Dan was doing, made the introduction, and that's how it worked. So it was an auspicious beginning in many ways. A lot of things happened concurrently that worked. There was cash on our books, there was someone seeking opportunity who was a well-established professional who did brilliantly at everything he did, and there was Sohrab sort of knocking at our door out of the blue looking for a new opportunity. And all of these things came together perfectly. The world conspired to create a great startup. Okay, very interesting story. And then if we can hear it from the other side, Dan, I think after today's Ideathon and the startup demo, I think it would be very interesting for people to hear, when was your actual aha moment when you were employed? When did it come to you?
So basically, like the timeline, I don't know if this is kind of loud. The timelines, just if people want to know, I think we had the first conversation like one of the last days, if not the last day of December of 2009. I think, the business planning process didn't take a long time. There's a couple of iterations looking at the model, and we basically by 2 weeks later, probably the middle of January, this is the commitment that I had made personally to go out and do. There was a commitment, obviously on a financial side as well too, a support side from Rabia and both as an individual and as a company as well too, to support that. And so like, we're only looking at like 2 or 3 weeks, you know, for that process. It wasn't like we spent like a year and a half on that particular idea, you know, looking at it and thinking about it, because it was something that was moving very quickly in other parts of the world, and it was something that if, you know, was going to be done, it needed to be done right away. And so that was middle of January. We incorporated the company. I incorporated GoNabit in the Cayman Islands initially as a company, as the holding company. The investment that we took went into the Cayman level, and then all the other entities we have within the company, whether it's the Dubai company, the Lebanon company, Egypt company, etc., we're all subsidiaries of or wholly owned companies of the Cayman company, just from a structure perspective. And I think that was a lot of the benefit of having, you know, support of people that, you know, had started businesses and structured them that way, and really that kind of like insight around how to structure a business well, not just for getting something up and running, but structure it in a way that as a company was, you know, a company that was in a good position to grow, take investment, and potentially be sold later on. And so, Robin and I met in March, end of February, I think, beginning of March maybe. We started working full time on the business March 17th. So basically, GoNabit as like an activity really started middle of March as a business. We had basically agreed, you know, financials and investment up front, and the investors who are going to be involved. I think what's a good thing for everyone to know is that, and, you know, I've talked about this to a lot of people before, is that, you know, when you agree like on an amount of money and terms for that money as well too, it's not like you know, the money hits your bank account the next day. You know, that's kind of the easy bit in a lot of ways. A lot of it is just drafting documents and getting documents done depending on which lawyer is going to do them. And I mean, so this took us a few months to put in place. And so we basically took like you know, as a business for GoNabit, so you know, we were operating out of the Bait office in Dubai, so we were having the support of that. You know, from an incubation perspective, tough bit, you know, as an entrepreneur, you know, is so we all put money into the business. I was the one, you know, investing in the money, you know, so I basically put all my money into it for the first 6 months, and our investment came in and actually hit the bank accounts in June of that year. So as an individual, you know, these guys have started more businesses than I have, so they can tell you a lot more about that than I can, but it's challenging. Like, I mean, you have to really commit everything. So I quit my job. You know, I was taking no salary from GoNabit. My wife had a baby like the day before we incorporated the company. She went back to work full time. It was literally all, I won't tell you how much we sold the company for, but I'll tell you, I put in all my money except $5,000 I kept on the side. And other than that, it was all the money I had went into the company.
Really? You were holding out on?
Yeah. And then Saurabh and I met in March, so I don't know if you want to...
Okay, very interesting. Now, Saurabh, it seems like you were very serendipitous, your arrival. Obviously, Rabia and Dan knowing each other, and then you just appearing on the scene. Dan was telling me that he was looking for a partner. And I think this is an issue that quite a few people face. They might come up with a good idea, but how to find that wingman or wingwoman in some people's cases. So
Yep.
Tell us a bit about your experience coming in as the third person.
So I was the gun for hire. I guess, you know, this is the 7th business I've been involved in starting. You know, I've started a bunch of businesses beforehand. I've had, you know, partners before. I came to Dubai beginning of February of that year, and I'd read about Groupon, and it was one of 3 ideas I had, you know, to see if I could, you know, bring them to life. I met Rabia through a mutual friend, and you know, Rabia is a pretty impressive, you know, person when you meet him. He's probably the smartest guy in the room, you know. It was an interesting meeting, and I realized that, hey, you know, this is someone that's very credible, and you know, I was interested to sort of see if there was an opportunity to, you know, be affiliated somehow. And then he said that there was someone that he'd met that had pitched him, you know, the group buying idea, and Dan walked in and gave me his business card, and that morning I'd actually had an email from a mutual friend who had invited us both to dinner. And I saw this name, Dan Stewart. I was like, you know, who's this? So he walked in, and he didn't make dinner that night because I think his wife was giving birth or something. But anyway, so we arranged to meet up, and I met Dan for a total of 6 hours, probably, and knew instantly that we were going to be able to work together. I think when you find a partner to start a business with, you look for a common work ethic, I guess a shared vision, and also you've got to be able to trust each other. And I think it helps if you have complementary skills. So I think, you know, that's why the partnership has been so effective, is that Dan has his skill sets, I have my skill sets, and there's not much overlap. So that's worked out really well. And I think something to point out here is that, you know, I could have gone away from those meetings and said, well, I'll wait to hear from you, Dan. You know, it was really nice meeting you, and I'll wait to hear from you with a formal proposal and how you want to do this. And, you know, Dan's there starting a business. He doesn't have time to say, right, I need to put together a job offer. I need to put together a job description. I've got to work out some contract that sort of says, hey, Saurabh, you know, you have sort of this many shares in the business. I have this many. How are we going to carve things up between ourselves? That would have taken a long time, and he wouldn't have been able to accelerate the business as quickly. So having, you know, been in that position myself before, I just decided to start. And, you know, after 3 meetings, I just turned up one day and said, right, you know, I'm going to work on this full time.
Then we had the conversation.
We had like a 5-minute conversation about, you know, very high level, how we were going to carve things up between ourselves in terms of responsibility, in terms of equity and all that. And we just got on with it. And I think for those people out there that are looking at, well, you know, I had a conversation with someone, look, you know, you need to be sure about the person. And I think both the combination of Rabia and Dan, I knew that, you know, sort of I wasn't going to get stabbed in the back. But ultimately, you know, being an entrepreneur is about taking risks and backing the right type of risks. So for me, you know, this was a good team to join. And it was a very easy startup for me. I mean, my second business I started was with a £5,000 on a credit card, and I slogged it through self-funding. This was a very harmonious entry for me.
Well, I think that's another interesting point. It seems that everything did come together very easily. You had the bait.
I mean, nothing's easy, but
you're
let's
making
not get
it sound
carried
very
away.
smooth. So Rabia, obviously extremely experienced. Sohrab, very experienced. You obviously worked there. Everything came together perfectly well. I want to go into a bit more on not just the money side, but what was the added value that BAPE brought, be it in some mentoring, or be it in business plans, be it in services. Can you go into that a bit more?
I think I'll let Dan speak about that, but naturally, I think there was, when you talk about the value add, Dan was already sitting in the office and had worked with me for several years, and the fact that we already had a clear dialogue and a very honest dialogue, and had it for years, made the transition very easy, and the talk about what sort of value add was brought to the table. In terms of what specifics BAIT tries to offer, so right now we're incubating several businesses within BAIT, and we continue to look for new opportunities to incubate. Generally, there's a few things that we bring. One is, which is very important, is the concept of structuring. I think a lot of .coms in the region fail from the outset due to poor structuring. I think no matter what you do well operationally, if from the outset your corporate structure is not right, you can build a great company that is uninvestable and unscalable. And so BAIT had some experience in actually building out good corporate structures that scaled across the region, which I think very few companies have had good experiences in. Two, in general, the BAIT experience has been a very sales-driven experience. And what attracted us to the GoNabit model, both Dan and I, to a large degree, was the fact that it required a strong sales force on the ground in every single geography that we were in. And again, Dan's background to a large degree came from a sales background, which then went into a management background. And we sort of knew what it would take to roll that out. So those are two of the elements that I think, you know, from structuring and just sales background, I think were valuable to both parties. But you know.
Yeah, I think like the one thing we're speaking about sales is important. Like one of the things that, because people ask me like, how did you know that this was going to be successful? Of course I didn't know it was going to be successful. None of us did, right? You never know it's going to be successful. But I think one of the things that appealed to all of us was the fact that in a lot of ways we're like a store. Like you open your doors and people, the first day, people either buy stuff or they don't. The second day, they either buy stuff or they don't. So it wasn't the kind of business where you build up usage over a long period of time and then try to monetize that usage. You get immediate business model feedback, which also lets you tweak your business model very early on. shifting from assumptions to actuals in that sense. And so it let us create kind of like progress milestones in that sense, in terms of like, you know, where we felt like we were getting to from a sales perspective, where we wanted to get to, but it's a very clear model in that sense. You know, two of the things that you know, I've spent a lot of time with Rabi over the years, and I think two things that absolutely stick out in my head that he said to me that were critical to the success of the business. One is that, and I can't remember the first time you ever said this to me because we had this conversation a bunch of times, but it was, when you're starting a business, have the difficult conversations as early as possible. You know, so that conversation of who's going to do what role they're going to have, what's the structure going to be, you know, and those type of things, right? Because I remember, you know, him telling me the stories of Bait in the beginning. You know, you have to have that conversations of what's going to be the equity split, and it might be crappy conversations at some point, but have them early and have that as the groundwork, right? I remember when we were looking at companies to potentially invest in, as those are conversations we'd have with them during that time too, is that, you know, how are things divided up between you? Well, you know, it's bit this, bit that, whatever. You know, you need to set those things in stone. And I think the other thing which really led to where we are today is, I don't know if everybody knows this, but Rabi has sold another business before as well. He sold a business to ArabNet. And so, you know, he had told me that one of the things that he had done was put himself on the map. So he had early on kind of reached out to the global leaders in that particular business. Records management is the best way to explain it, records management. Boxes of papers. But to reach out and say, here I am, I'm on the map, and maybe someday, you know, synergies will align and you'll buy me or something, right? But so that's what we did. And so, you know, we launched in May, and in December of that year, I started doing that. So I reached out to two different businesses, which you've probably heard of before. You know, those reaching out actually turned into conversations and then turned into visits. We also had someone approach us as well. So very early on, what became like, here we are on the map, became like situations that none of us expected. What was that, 7 or 8 months, 7 months after we launched the business. And so, and it turns out that the one group that was the most direct example of me reaching out was actually Living Social, and that's kind of where we ended up. So to say that that advice was critical to where we are right now today would be an understatement. So I think those two things were really fantastic takeaways for me, and that, like I said, were key parts of where we are as a business now, and where we ended up as entrepreneurs as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask a little bit more of a pointed question. So, you know, if an investor that's present here today were to see all three of your profiles on paper and take a bet on if something would work if they stuck you in a room together, I'm pretty sure your odds of succeeding would be very, very high. Again, I go back to what we've seen earlier in the day with younger people who haven't had that experience working, certainly not selling companies before, right at the beginning. You know, the conversations that we're having here may not necessarily apply to them. How can these people get access to the knowledge capital that you're talking about? You know, is it a question of coming to Bait? Is it, you know, do you offer any workshop sessions? Do you do any pro bono stuff? Are you accessible? Do you have other people you can suggest as mentors? You know, how can we solve that problem?
If I may, just a few comments there. I think most young startups that knock on my door have an excessive concern with exit even before they start. And I think that's a problem from the outset. I think people starting a business should really be thinking about, how do I build a great business? If you do build a great business, great investors will come your way. If you're too focused on selling from the outset, more likely than not, things are not going to work out. Which brings me to the next point. If you are focused on building a great business, what are you looking at? Well, first and foremost, you're looking at building a great team. And I think that's what we managed to build here. So the beauty of the GoNabit story was, we felt it was a really unique, special team, and we were very proud of that from day one. We felt that no matter what happens in the future, at least we knew we were building something that we could be proud of 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the line. And that was an extremely important starting point. The next part after you build the great team is build a structure that lasts. So that becomes the second point. Now, in terms of, you know, what advice we can give or what availability we have, I know Sora, Dan, and myself, one of our, I would say, you know, passions is trying to support entrepreneurship in the region in any way we can. So I literally spend at least an hour or two a day meeting entrepreneurs who have knocked on my door, young entrepreneurs who are either seeking mentorship, advice, incubation, investment. And it's one of the things that I truly enjoy. It's a highlight of my day. And I've seen that Dan and Saurabh are continually out and about and spreading the message about what it takes to be out there. And I'll also add to that that for us as Bait, we're continually looking at what other entrepreneurial ventures we can support. And so, you know, there are a few of the founders of Mom's World in this room. Mom's World is one of those ventures right now that, you know, is something we're very excited, and it brings together a unique team of entrepreneurs who are really building out a great organization, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with them. And there are a few other things up our sleeves, so, you know, my message to entrepreneurs out there is if you have something interesting you'd like to talk about, my door is certainly open.
Okay, Saurabh, can you contribute?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, you know, Rabia is right in pointing out that, you know, we're all passionate about sort of encouraging entrepreneurship. I came to ArabNet 2 years ago, and this was during the time I was stalking Dan. He still hadn't decided that, you know, we were right for each other. But, you know, we'd kind of met a few times.
We dated before that.
You married before you dated. The dating came later.
Yeah.
It was arranged marriage.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess I started my first business when I was 17 years old. It was a sandwich bar in London. I didn't know anything about that business. I threw myself into it, and I learned sort of as I went along, and went and spoke to sandwich bar owners and asked them question after question after question. And then the really good thing I did was I went and got a job working for a telecom company. And I think that, you know, those people looking to start a business, if you're fresh out of college, what I would advise is, you know, go and work somewhere for a while. You'd be surprised how much you can learn. It was, you know, totally invaluable to me. I had a great mentor, great person I worked for. I learned a hell of a lot there. And I started to read a lot. And I started to read about, you know, people. I read Sam Walton's book. That was very inspirational. And I continued to read about successful entrepreneurs and sort of try and identify how they approach the challenges, how they set about doing what they were doing. So, you know, our doors open, but also I think there's a huge amount of sort of information and tools out there that entrepreneurs can start with. And I think that, you know, if you work somewhere, then try and explore things that are outside of your specific domain. So you get a more holistic view of sort of how business works. And you know, our doors open. We're in Media City in Dubai. And if you want to come and speak to us, please give us a call, and you know, be more than happy to buy you lunch.
Anybody that knows me probably knows I have no shortage of free advice, even if it's not really looked for sometimes. But I mean, I think things for me is that, like, probably the most valuable experience I've ever had. And when I go and talk now, like, if you've never worked in sales, please find a way to go work in sales. I mean, no matter what you end up going to do, by working in sales at some point, it's the kind of skills which you'll apply. Pitching, the pitches that I watched today, great stuff, you know, but I can kind of tell the people that maybe have worked in sales and that haven't, you know, because, you know, I think it's ultimately that's what you are as a business. So what's my job, like in the business? My job from day one was internal and external sales. So I was the first salesperson. Fine, if I couldn't sign anybody up, we weren't going to suffer we were going to suffer as a business. We were never going to survive. You know, whether it's selling to potential investors, whether it's selling to local government, or, you know, whether it's selling to whoever, whether it's, I sell every day because I interview every day for our company, and I'm selling our business, I'm selling a role at our company, I'm selling what a job is like, I'm selling our environment, our structure. Everything that we're doing is that, essentially. So if you've never had that experience, it's a fantastic experience. Because if you look at me on paper, I actually would disagree. You probably wouldn't think I would be like a good, you know, potential option. Like, I got an English literature degree and a history degree from university. I have a master's degree in education. I'm probably not like the, you know, the most prototypical, you know, internet entrepreneur.
I got to interject. So Dan joined Bait having been a school teacher. It was,
as a school teacher, I managed a department of 17
but
people.
I have to say,
so.
It was genius on the part of the HR manager who met him to actually bring him in, because he was off the bat the top performer. So I think it's amazing on a CV, just going back, if I had seen that CV, I would have probably not made that decision. And you know, I'm certainly glad that she did interview him and met him and saw in him with the potential that he obviously had. And I'm very glad that he took that risk too, because for him to make such a career change was definitely, I guess, part of his nature. His ability to take on risks and new challenges is, I think, something quite unique to him.
Like, the two biggest risks in my life really have been when I moved from Kuwait to Dubai. I completely switched my careers when I was like 33 at the time. I had a girlfriend who I was kind of hoping would end up being my wife someday, and that worked out pretty well. You know, I moved to a place I'd been to for like a couple hours before, or a day or something before. It's Dubai. I knew nothing about it, but she was moving there. So sometimes you make decisions that you think about for a long time, and sometimes you just kind of do things. It was the latter for me. That worked out really well. And then, you know, really doing what I did here. So there's, you know, with GoNabit, you could probably say I started, you know, the business at the worst possible time in my life. Like I said, like my wife literally gave birth like the week that we incorporated the company. She actually gave birth again the day before we announced the transaction. So during that period, she had 2 kids and a full-time job, and I had a startup. But, you know, I'm not sure this is true, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that, you know, maybe I had no room to fail. You know, it's not like, people say it's easier to start a business when you're younger because you have a lot of flexibility and it's no big deal if you fail. Well, but you also know that it's no big deal to fail. So I feel like sometimes it's better to start when you have a lot more to lose, you know, because you force yourself. Like when you work 12 and 14-hour days, 7 days a week, you're doing it because you have no option but to try to succeed, you know. And I think, I mean, like, I guarantee that all of us, when like we started as first businesses, and with Bait, when Saurabh has been through, and I know even with GoNabit as well, we've all made sacrifices. So this wasn't kind of something where we worked like 9 to 5 and went and hung out at home and took big vacations and whatever. Like for Saurabh and I especially, this is all we've done for the last 2 years, and I mean all we've done. And you know, if you're not willing to do that, go get a job with somebody else. Don't start a business, because if you're not willing to commit to it, no one's going to commit to you, and no one's going to certainly invest in you as a business. So unless you're willing to, you know, really go all in with your life, go get a job.
Okay, thank you for that excellent advice. I think we have to open it to the floor for questions. So, anyone want to kick us off? No questions at all? Okay. Can we have a mic? Is anyone?
Hello. At the time when Living Social acquired GoNabit, there were a bunch of like group buying sites or similar to GoNabit in the market. Why do you think, in your like true and honest opinion, Living Social approached you and not the others?
None of them were as good.
We were taller.
I mean, look, so I sat in an office in Washington, D.C. in December.
Can I just, can I butt in? Because actually, I think it would be interesting if one of the others answered this, because I see you answer this question a lot, and since Rabia was kind of crucial at the beginning, especially with looking at the investment potential, how do you see, you were at the beginning, and how do you then see the attractiveness at the end? What's your view on that?
So, you know, as Dan mentioned, right from the outset, Dan went out and spoke to multiple potential partners and put us on the map. So the global group buying sites were aware of our existence. And beyond that, I think they were attracted to the story. So there was a great management team, there was a great structure, and there were great metrics associated with it. And we spoke the same language. So we could go speak to a multinational, and we really understood what they were looking for, and they understood us. And so there wasn't a language barrier to speak of. So I think, you know.
Do you not think also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you guys don't do cash on delivery, is that correct? So is that potentially an advantage when it comes to getting acquired?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were lots of things that we held true to the business model in terms of being focused on pure e-commerce, as opposed to sort of deviating away from the model in ways that we didn't think were going to scale successfully sort of down the road. And I think that also, you know, if you're a expanding US company and you're looking at the Middle East, you know, the last thing you want to do is invest in a company where it's going to become a problem for you. So, you know, the number one thing you're looking for is a management team that's going to be out there and is going to execute and is going to have business ethics, values that are aligned to yours, because the last thing you want is something going wrong where the local managers are managing the business in another sort of in an anarchical way. And I think that, you know, what they saw in Dan and I, you know, obviously gave them enough assurance that they came to the Middle East and said, hey, you know, this is a great investment and one that we think these guys can manage moving forward and scale moving forward. So, you know, when you're at that sort of stage of business model sort of development, and you're looking at sort of international expansion, the last thing you want to do is tie up your senior management team with having to worry about the acquisitions. So I think, based on our track record of what we've done with the resources that we had, and the way we managed our business and the values that we had and the team that we built, I guess that's why they chose us.
Okay, great. Can I take a question from the lady in the front here with the mic?
Hello, I'm Ola. My question will sound politically incorrect, but the number I'm asking about is very important for businesses and startups. And why aren't you announcing the number or the size of the acquisition? Why?
It's not politically incorrect. It's legally incorrect usually. So a lot of these transactions happen with confidentiality clauses associated with them that prevent one from disclosing the actual amount. And in this case, this is one such case where the transaction amount, the contract states that we do not disclose. Who asks is a secondary point, I think. But the agreement is such that we don't disclose the figure.
Could we know then perhaps, since I believe you were all invested in it, can we know how the actual deal was done? So, did they buy all of you out? Was it some of you? Something like that?
Yeah. Sure, it's 100% acquisition of the business.
Okay, so you're just running it now.
Sorry?
You're just running and managing the...
They acquired 100% of the business.
Okay. Good answer. Yeah, could we go to
I think just if you're fishing for something, suffice it to say, the return on investment was pretty phenomenal. Could it have been better had we done it longer or not? These are all questions in hindsight you can ask, but I think on paper, the transaction was, from a financial perspective, a great transaction. Okay? Without disclosing the specifics of the figure.
Thank you. Can we go to the guy in the red there in the middle?
My question to Mr. Rabia. The idea like GoNabit looks very similar to Groupon and similar other websites. These ideas doesn't look any different from what's happening in the Middle East, especially to the last year where we have seen massive changes in other countries like Egypt, Syria, Yemen, Libya. These changes should have influences on ideas, should go to startup. So what do you think that new business models have to come in the coming years to reflect the changes happening in those countries?
Interesting question.
If your question is there opportunity for new startups in the region with new ideas? There certainly is massive opportunity. As a region, we're seriously underserved by the number of startups that exist. So there's a lot of room for young, intelligent people to build great businesses that touch millions of people's lives. And I encourage everyone in this room, if you aren't already involved in a startup, to become involved in one. Because if you look at our single largest problem in the region today, it's youth unemployment when you talk about the Arab Spring. And everywhere in the world, the greatest way to tackle unemployment is by the generation of new jobs through entrepreneurship. So even in the US market, for the last 20 years, the job market would have contracted had it not been for startups. And so, are there opportunities? There are tons of them. Do I recommend, and am I interested in being involved in such opportunities? I certainly am. Every day I wake up and there are 10 brilliant new ideas that come my way. And to be honest, I'm limited in bandwidth. I would love to be able to start 100 new companies. Unfortunately, I can't. But there's more than 100 people in this room. Perhaps if each of us starts one, we would have a very different Middle East 5 years from now.
Thank you. Okay. Yep. Can we have the...
Hi, my name is Imad Al-Masoudi. I am the CEO of ArabNet.com, the leading real estate portal in the region. I had a question about scalability. I can imagine that your company went through scalability challenges. Can you tell us a little bit about scaling the team, scaling the operations, scaling sales and things like that, and some recommendations and advice for us?
From the sales perspective, I mean, you know, I don't know how big your sales organization is, what sort of sales organization you're looking to build, but you need to invest a lot in recruitment. You know, you need to invest a lot of your personal time in recruitment, and you need to find a formula that sort of works. And what I would advise is to start to capture data right from the get-go. So it doesn't matter how small you are. If you're looking for certain attributes when you're interviewing people and you're looking for certain qualities, you know, take note. You know, if one of those is, I don't know, coachability of someone, for example, you know, make a note of that and see how they perform. You know, does that person become a winner within your sales organization? Because then you're going to have really good data that sort of shows you, right, these are the attributes that seem to be performing well for our sales team. So now you can go out and hire against that. So you need to invest a lot in recruitment. You know, Dan and I would spend at least a day a week in total sort of interviewing.
I spend more probably.
Yeah,
like,
probably more. I mean,
it's like for the first year or so, like when we got to 45 staff, so I basically, like we hired the first 45, like I was the HR department. So from drop the job description to post the job, to screen the applicants, to send the emails, to make the first interviews, doesn't matter where they were, because we have staff in Dubai, we have staff in Abu Dhabi, we have staff in Cairo, we have staff in Beirut. So we would travel around to do interviews. And the scaling for us was complex because we put people in all these different places. So, you know, Saurabh primarily looks after sales and operations in the business, and I did all the non-fun stuff, right? So I was like the lawyer and incorporating in new countries, and, you know, the finance manager, and I was the HR, no offense to people that do these jobs, you know, HR manager, and a lot of the structural stuff, but that was what I did. So literally my role in the business was to build out the body of the business and kind of marked out territory that Saurabh then filled with our operations as a business, right? Is really kind of how we split things up essentially. But it's a lot of work.
My one piece of advice, if I'm allowed to give it, is hire great people from the outset. The only way you'll be able to scale is by reducing your hiring mistakes. Otherwise, you're spending too much time having to just reshuffle HR. So focus on people, everything else falls into place.
Do you think that you have all the best people then, since you're head of the biggest recruitment site and you are spending so much time picking the right people? Is there anybody left for the rest of us?
There's tons of great people out there.
I hired like half of our staff through Bait, actually. Like literally posting jobs, filtering applicants, like we should be case study.
We got charged for it.
Okay, all right. I think we're quite a way over time. I know there's a lot of other questions, but perhaps they can be answered a bit later. Thank you very much, panelists.
Thanks.
Thank you, audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.